Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
Welcome, friends, and that is going to be a powerful word that we use today, friends. Growing up, I actually didn't have friends. I grew up in a household where friends were not something that were allowed. I worked a lot as a child and grew up really without that level of socialization. And so when I went off to school, it became difficult to connect with individuals in that way because I had become an individual that was more contractual, a little bit more of a person that had the exchange of business wrapped into what was called friendship. And in working with people in that way, I found that there was a lack of intimacy, a lack of vulnerability. It was difficult to get close. And in all of the personal growth work that I've done, I've realized that that lack of friendship had more to do with me than it had to do with others. It was my own inability to befriend myself, to know myself, to know my own fears, my desires, my wants, my needs, my heart, and my own understanding about people. So often we're conditioned in a way that we will look at the world and look at people from the lens of those that we were reared by or the experiences that we had. And that can tinge our relationships in a way that we don't truly understand what it means to be a friend. And then there come moments where something strikes and you start to discover what friendship is because someone holds that candle in the darkness. This is the topic today that we're talking about, friendship. And it is likened to a bud that opens slowly for many of us, at least it did for me, where you really do get to experience the nuances and the textures of what friendship can be and how it can open. I want to share a passage that is in this beautiful book by Mark Nepo, and the book is titled, "You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship." It is remarkable that our souls can wake and move through the world, and to have the walls come down between us is twice the miracle. In time, a labyrinth to shared happiness appears that we can map and travel together. But whether we arrive anywhere or not, being close to one another is its own reward. Then the only task between birth and death is to shed every disguise in favor of love. Along the way, it takes courage to come out of the dark, courage to part the sea of insecurity and make room for another, courage to let the being inherent in all things rise, and courage to stay luminous and full of care. When living this close to the heart of things, we are easily stunned by the majesty of life, crashing over our small and stubborn interests. Yet through the miracle of friendship, we can endure the forces of life as they wash us of our masks. Whatever the storm or disturbance, all we can do is hold each other up as we are worn to who we are. No matter the path, the constant aim of spiritual friendship is to uncover and inhabit the unity of souls that weaves everyone together while bringing us alive. And Mark opens his book, You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship, with, "To know someone deeply is like hearing the moon through the ocean or having a hawk lay bright leaves at your feet. It seems impossible, even while it happens, for my friends who have saved me more than once." My guest today is a returning guest. Mark has had over 1 million copies sold and has moved and inspired readers and seekers all over the world with his #1 New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening. Beloved as a poet, teacher, and storyteller, Mark has been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time, a consummate storyteller, and an eloquent spiritual teacher. His work is widely accessible and used by many, and his books have been translated into more than 20 languages. A best-selling author, he has published 26 books and recorded 17 audio projects. He has received the Lifetime Achievement Awards from Age Nation and Om Times, and in 2016 was named by Watkins Mind, Body, Spirit as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. He was also chosen as one of OWN's Super Soul 100, a group of inspired leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. Welcome back, Mark, to 1111 Talk Radio.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be with you. And I so appreciated your opening and sharing your own journey around friendship, which is so powerful, I think, for everyone. The details may be different, but we all go through this journey.
This is an important topic, and I started that way because whether or not we've had those experiences in the past, we've been through such a tumult in our society and in our world that whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, a lot of us, I think, have contracted inward. And there is a guardedness that can form when we do that. And opening back up and finding the types of friendships that really nurture the spirit and the heart and allow for the vulnerability and authenticity that true fulfilling friendship offers can sometimes feel scary to navigate. And how does that closed bud start to open when that's the case, if we are walking in a world where there is the constant stimuli, there is always seemingly threats, whether they are true or not? How do we then befriend ourselves enough to open to friendship outside of us?
Yeah, and I think it's particularly acute in our age, but these are archetypal challenges that have been since the beginning of time. And, the challenge has always been, I think, two lines that have been of mine that I retrieved that have been a teacher for me is, they say to harden will help you get through life, but to soften will help you experience life. And, we think, as you said, that it's a natural reflex to say, oh, to make it through, I gotta tuck in, I've got to get the walls up. But it's always been true that no matter what we are trying to wall out, we wall in just as much as we wall out. And, I always loved, there was a poem by D.H. Lawrence called Self-Protection, in which he asks, is the best self-protection hiding who you are or being who you are? And I think it takes that quiet turn when we realize, often because nothing else has worked, that what good is it to protect ourselves if life can't reach us? So now, even in spite of our want to protect ourselves, we have to reach out. We have to be touched. I think a very example for me from my life and growing up, because I grew up in a family that was very, very difficult, very dysfunctional, and therefore, I felt like I was a sensitive one, raised, by a den of bears, and I would always be easily hurt and never surprised. And so I wound up developing what I called my catcher's mitt, where I would fend off wherever it come from behind me, and I would know it was there. And I would never show the hurt until I was alone with myself, because it would always in my family lead to more hurt if I showed that I was vulnerable. Well, that got me out of adolescence, but when in my early 30s, as you know, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma, and to be blessed to still be here, well, on the other side, I didn't survive not to be touched by life. Mm. So I had to put that catcher's mitt down, which took a lot of time. And, there's so many quotes that I refer to in the book, but, one by Cicero, who said that a friend is a second self. And to me, what I understand about that is, a true friend is someone that it's being with you is almost like being alone. And that's a compliment.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I understand that statement very much now. It's not something I understood for a lot of my life, but I do understand it now. And one thing that I've discovered is that safety, to feel safe with another person, is really my measurement of whether or not this is a person that I can develop a friendship with. And a lot of that's because I've always been extremely open, extremely empathic, and often would watch words do say one thing and actions do another. You have a line in the book where you say, in the raw and tender space of such honesty, the work of friendship really begins. How important is that safety
Uh,
and raw and tenderness? And is that something that you feel like appears at the beginning or has some semblance at the beginning of what will be true friendships? Or is that something that has to be cultivated?
well, I think both. I would equate that authenticity equivalent to the air we breathe. It's necessary if there's to be any true connection. And so it doesn't matter whether it's first, middle, or last. We have to breathe. And I think that, it's interesting, as you know from the book, that the, uh, the root of the word friendship means place of high safety.
Mm.
And so I think that this is the authenticity of, of owning who we are and our limits and our flaws. And that is the ground with which we develop intimacy. And, so an example, again, from my life is that, years, like 10 or 12 years ago now, but our dog Mira, who was like a furry child to us, had died. And we also had other losses around at that time. And we were just, my wife Susan and I were not prepared for how raw that grief was going to be. And we had a couple that we were friends with, and we thought we were very close with them, and they couldn't go there with us, which was a shock, and it also wound up really kind of ending the friendship. And instead, they wanted us to get back to normal. And I think our grief scared them. And so this is a good example for the authenticity. So if they had been real and simply said, wow, your grief scares me, but I'm here. Well, then we could have said, yeah, it scares us too. And that would have brought us closer because we would have been working authentically into the unknown together. But to push it away and even pathologize the grief and say, well, when are they going to get back to normal? That cut the path to intimacy. And so that's just an example that you can see. It is so important, and we can discover this at any moment.
That brings about a couple of questions, and that's
Sure.
such a great segue into this part of the topic, because there are different types of friendships. There are different levels. There's that superficial. There's the one that is more of the contractual business. There's a deeper loving companionship friendship, and then there's a deepened spiritual friendship. And you write in the book that friendship is the vocation of seeking truth together, that seeking truth together is the call to find meaning in life in the trusted company of others. It seems to me that we could have all those types of friendships, but if the companion spiritual friendship is not there, then there really wouldn't be much meaning and fulfillment with the other friendships. But if
Yeah.
all are there, then there feels like a more holistic approach that feeds all parts of ourselves.
Well, I think this is because I agree. And I think that what we find, especially in our modern Western world, is, the initial sense of friendship is we problem solve together. Your car breaks down, I pick you up, and that's all wonderful. That is showing up for each other. And somehow there's an unspoken assumption that what happens inside us, we keep to ourselves, and we have to do it alone. And that's the ground. I think the outer form of friendship is an apprenticeship for the deeper inner form of friendship. That no one, the great paradox is no one can live your life for you, and no one can do it alone. And so how do we bear witness? How do we be a companion? Compassion literally means to be with, And so that's where the deeper journey, where, we don't have to see things the same way. I can still accompany you on your journey of discovering who you are. And my discovering who I am doesn't have to coincide with it. The truth of our journeys needs to coincide, not where they're going.
I've always heard growing up that if you can have even one handful, 5 fingers worth of good, rich, deep friendships, that you are actually doing far more than what most people ever have. And there are many people that have a lot of acquaintances that seemingly have lots and lots of friends and socialization, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have that true sense of friendship. Can you give the distinction between casual friendship, spiritual friendship, and then the poor friend?
Sure. And again, as you know, as we talk, what I share are examples, not instructions. So let me speak to it from my, perch on life. And so I think that let's start in, that a true spiritual friend is someone who agrees and commits that we're on this journey regardless of what happens. And it's not my place as a friend to, even under good intention, to direct you how to grow or even to problem solve for you. It's my job to stay close, help when you can't do it yourself, and support you to do what only you can do, and vice versa. So another example and this is a beautiful example of during my cancer journey, and I talk in there about one of my friends, John, who's now gone. And so during my cancer journey, and you can imagine, I went through it very open, and I wanted to talk about things, and I needed people to journey with, and he was right there. And in fact, I tell the story in the book, and one of my surgeries, it was diagnostic, and so there was a complicated sample of tissue from my skull bone, and it needed to go a couple of hours to a very specific lab in order to diagnose what kind of cancer I had. And I didn't know this because I was out, and that there was a lot of red tape, and there was some trouble about getting it signed off so it could get to the lab while the tissue was still fresh. And I didn't know, but my friend John, he burst in there and said, "Give it to me, I'll take it." And he threw the cooler in his car and drove to the lab. And I learned later that he did that, and I was so touched. But years later, about 10 years later, he went through his own cancer journey. And I was there, of course, I wanted to be there for him, and I was ready to be there for him. And I was shocked that though he didn't want to be open about it. He was very closed, very private, didn't want to talk about it. And I realized in that moment that not only had he done the outer form of friendship by taking my tissue from my skull to driving it to this lab, but inwardly, he did the journey with me the way I needed to do it, which was very unnatural for him. And he did it so well, I didn't realize that until it was his turn. And so he was both a friend in the that outer sense and in the inner sense. And so I needed to follow his lead. And so I spent time just sitting by his bed, holding his hand, not talking. Even I remember one time that he was, I think, anxious and breathing rather rapidly, and he didn't want to talk about it. So I just kept holding his hand and breathing slowly. And eventually he started breathing to my pace of breathing.
Hmm. When I compare and contrast the two stories that you have shared, the friends that could not be with your grief when your precious dog passed, and this friend who had been with you through what was a very challenging experience in regard to the cancer that you had, it seems that friends can come into our lives as teachers, teaching us both how not to be and teaching us how to be. So do we grow into friendship then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We grow into friendship. And that depends on what we were talking about earlier. We grow at the pace with which we are real and authentic. And that's the difference, if in all your humanity and mind, if you come to me and say like, wow, I don't know what to do with this, what you're going through, but I'm here. That opens the door. Versus, and the other example or tendency that has us be a poor friend is when we make it all about us. When we have an agenda, when we're controlling, even when we think that we're doing it out of goodwill, and I'll give you a very different example for this. So my former, in a previous life, in my second marriage, my father-in-law was a lifelong farmer and a school superintendent, one-room schoolhouse he began, and in upstate New York. And he was a wonderful guy. He'd give you, one of these people, he'd give you the shirt off his back, really. But he really was very controlling. And I remember one day when I was staying with him, he drove me up to a back field on his farm. I'm not saying where we were going or why, which was his nature. And we went there, we leaned on the truck, and before me, he was showing me a field of black walnut trees that he had planted. Now, black walnuts won't grow for almost 100 years. So at first I was very touched. Here he was planting something for beyond his life. And I was very touched by that. But the longer we stood there and the longer he was talking, it became clear to me that not directly, but in a manipulative way, he was wanting me to say I'd take care of those trees when he was gone.
Mm.
And, respectfully, I didn't say anything to him. I listened. But honestly, I thought, and he was a very good man. And I thought, in that moment, he was a good friend to the earth and to the trees. And he wasn't a good friend to me because why wasn't one life enough? To me, a good friend, and also because he was older, he was my father-in-law in the sense of a father figure, I would have wanted someone to say, look at these black walnuts. I'm leaving something beyond me. And I would have wanted that friend, father figure to say to me, these are my black walnuts, what's yours?
That's powerful. That's really powerful. And it also speaks to this idea that sometimes we can portray a goodness or try to be good, thinking that that is what friendship is, or even overgiving and thinking that that's what friendship is. But that actually becomes a needy, manipulative way. You talk about in the book, you say, I also want to acknowledge how hard it can be to love another and be true to yourself at the same time. Learning how to love another without giving yourself away is a lifelong challenge. That leans back into that authenticity.
Yes, and I think that this raises every question that you're raising, every place that we look invites a practice that everyone has to personalize, and this that you've lifted up this one. This is a constant practice for everyone to figure out for themselves, and we can compare notes. But we often are struggle between these two extremes. On the one hand, my sensitivity will allow me to become your suffering, and then I can lose myself. And then I go, oh, wow, nobody told me it would be like this. So then I go to the other extreme and say, well, I'm cutting all that off. Forget that. And I think the challenge of being a good friend is the practice of having porous boundaries. The practice of how do we, as you read from the quote, how do I stay close and open to your joy and suffering and not lose who I am? And how do I not wall myself off because it's difficult? So there's two, let me give you two examples here. One is during my cancer journey years ago.
Mark, I'm going to have you hold those examples to the next section so that we can go to commercial break, but please bring those back.
Yep.
Do you secretly feel alone in a crowd? Perhaps you're not a loner, but you don't have any in-depth friends. It was that listening that introduced Mark to the invisible cord that runs through. He says true friends are heroes and heroines who remind us that we are possible. They are the human stars who come out when things go dark. When things go well, they are often unseeable, like stars during the day, but in our sudden night, we see them and go, oh, I can find my way. Mark Nepo wrote this book to affirm the spirit of friendship, to praise what it takes to love another well, to better understand the physics of friendship, and to show that despite what we've been taught, you don't have to do it alone. The title of the book is You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. And Mark's website is marknepo.com. Please take special note of an upcoming September 15th to 21st week-long gathering at the Modern Elder Academy in Santa Fe, if you'd like to be a part of that. And also, Mark does a year-long journey every year for small groups of 16, where the group meets 4 weekends over a year, and there are 7 spots left for the group that begins April 2025. You definitely want to check those things out when you go to his website, marknepo.com. We'll be right back with more of Mark Nepo, and You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship, right after these messages.
Follow Voice America at Facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Have you seen 1111? Do you wonder why certain numbers keep showing up in your life? 11, 111, 22, 33, 444. People all over the world are seeing 1111 and learning the language of universal communication. Subscribe to 1111 Magazine today. www.1111mag.com. 1111 Magazine is a bi-monthly print publication that offers a rich, multi-sensory experience. As you engage with experts and topics of consciousness, become enlightened, empowered, and energized, so you live a passionate and authentic life of conscious choices. 1111 Magazine, a daily staple for lifting the mindset, discovering the heart, and stepping into conscious living. 1111 Magazine. Order now at www.1111mag.com. 1111mag.com.
Do you want more? More joy, more abundance, more power and presence? How would it feel to have more loving relationships? more empowered community, greater fulfillment, and life purpose? The 1111 Mastermind community inspires, empowers, guides, and supports transformation. Shift your mind, expand your heart, deepen insights, let go and chart a new course, dream a new dream. The 1111 Mastermind community is an online portal for personal transformation and soulful expansion. Go to courses.1111mag.com. That's courses.1111mag.com. Change begins with you. Let it be simple, convenient, and transformative. The time is now. Step through the 1111 gateway. Courses.1111mag.com.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
Often when we ask for someone's opinion, we really don't want it. We just want to be mirrored and validated. When feeling insecure or needy, we often want to be seen. When to know our own worth more completely, we deeply need to see. In this cross purpose, we often mislead our loved ones, asking for one thing while secretly hoping for another. Yet it is the commitment to see each other completely that returns us to the unity of souls, while the entanglements we dare not speak of prevent us from finding and knowing that bond. This is from Mark Nepo's book, You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. You can find out more at marknepo.com, and he has a couple of upcoming events, September 15th through 21st, Modern Elder Academy in Santa Fe. It's a week-long experience, along with a year-long journey for small groups of 16, where you meet 4 weekends over a year. There are 7 spots left for the group beginning April 2025, so go check that out. Mark, when we left the last segment, we were talking about how hard it can be to love another and be true to yourself at the same time. And we also spoke about your line, learning how to love another without giving yourself away is a lifelong challenge. I'd love for you to go ahead and share any experiences that you may have around that.
Yeah. So one that comes up as a good example is, I have a friend who struggles with anxiety and depression. Now, we all have different things. Those aren't my struggles. I have my own struggles. So I'm committed in our friendship and spend time with this person, and so I'm there. But when I leave, I have to do something to restore my direct experience of life, to remind myself that I'm not depressed and anxious. I have my own things. And so that's a good example of what I mean is I don't need to avoid that person so I don't lose myself, and I don't need to lose myself, and I need somehow, what is the thing? So for me, one of the things is I walk my dog and just put my face up into the light and breathe and realize I am there, and but for a hiccup, I would be struggling with those things, but I'm not. I struggle with other things. And so it does no good for us to become each other's suffering, but to be close enough. Well, and this is another profound example that kind of taught me this. And it was during my cancer journey, where I had a very, very difficult initial chemo treatment that was a couple of weeks after I had a rib removed in my back. And that treatment was really botched, and I was in a Holiday Inn with my former wife and my dear friend. This is the friend Paul, who I'll bring this story forward all these years because it's an amazing story of friendship. And they were with me, and I could not. I was getting sick every 20 minutes, and with a rib that had been removed, it was very difficult to get sick and throw up with that so present. And eventually we did go to an emergency room, but kept feeling like, well, this has to end. And so it was very difficult and frightening. And so somewhere, just as dawn was rising, before we went to the emergency room, I think because I was exhausted and I couldn't no longer filter things in, but everything came in at once, I realized in that moment that to be broken is no reason to see all things as broken. And I realized in that moment, as painful and frightened as I was, somewhere nearby a baby was being born. Somewhere nearby a couple were making love for the first time. Somewhere nearby an estranged father and son were sitting down finally over coffee as the sun came up. And as I reflected on that for years later, I've come to understand, and this is a deepening of what we started with about not losing ourselves but being open to each other. I realized that when I'm afraid, I need the company of those who know what it's like to be afraid. But I need everything safe to heal. When I'm broken, I need the company of those who know what it feels like to be broken, but I need everything whole to heal. And so we need to put our face in the sun and reconnect our direct experience of life so we can be there for each other, so I don't lose myself and I don't close myself off. Now, Paul, who held my stomach while I got sick in a Holiday Inn all those years ago, and a couple of years ago, his beloved wife, he lost her to a massive heart attack. It was a very difficult and devastating blow, and you can imagine I, of course, wanted to be there for him, and I have been. And we have deepened our lifelong friendship even more. And so I mentioned in the book, I have a men's group. We've been 7 of us who have traveled through life together for 18 years now. We are really like brothers. And of course, they knew about Paul, but they had never met Paul. So they supported me in supporting him. And that really opened me to one of the chapters in the book. Is called The Art of Netting, taking the word net and making a verb out of it, because a net helps to distribute the weight. And so they, even though they've never met Paul, they supporting me, supporting Paul, they were the net. And we take turns, someday or next month, I'll be in the center and you could be supporting me, and friends of yours who don't know me but know you will support you and help distribute the suffering. This is one of the arts and practices of true friendship. It's remarkable, and I do have to say that, which was just wonderful that it turned out this way. So 2 weeks ago when the book came out, my friend Paul, who lives in Florida, was visiting here in Kalamazoo. And so on the publication day, he and my men's group friends finally met at a barbecue in our backyard. And it was the day of the book coming out, so I was able to gift each of them their copy of the book.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that section of the book on the art of netting. It is so very powerful. And my experience of understanding friendship actually came at a moment of extreme loss and really, really intense grief, a type of very prolonged grief. And what occurred at that time was, I would say, the majority of people in my life disappeared. And it was because they couldn't be with the grief. They couldn't be with the pain, the trauma, the loss, the experience that had happened. And I don't fault them for not having anything to say or not knowing how. But the gold that came out of that experience was one person who came to me and said, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to change anything. I'm not here to tell you to move on, which is something so many people had said. I am here to just be present, to listen, cry if you need to cry, be silent if you need to be silent. I will call you every single day and sit silently on the phone just so you know you're not alone.
That's beautiful.
And that was the most powerful experience. And she has become the best friend that I could have ever had, because there's no weight upon one another to fix anything. We're allowed to be fully who we are with one another. And you write in your book, kindness of the sort that lasts comes from the courage to welcome others into the depth of our own nature, into the depth of all nature. The world depends on such wordless communion. The heart of a good friend is great, open space, as sacred as any land in the world we might visit.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that. I think it's so true. And it's all working on this book has also dovetailed or merged with my life as a teacher, because this kind of presence we're talking about that's at the heart of friendship is also, to me, at the heart of teaching. And so, I have come after a lifetime of teaching to believe that you can't change anyone. So what am I doing? Well, I think it's changed my understanding of what it is to be a teacher. I think to be a teacher, and this is formally or informally, this is whether you have a classroom or you're just a good friend, I think it is to be like a greenhouse, to provide light and warmth, and the living thing before us will grow of its own accord in the direction it is meant to grow, not even in the direction that I and my love want you to grow. That's presumptuous. I can't know how you should grow, but I can provide light and warmth and being the way that friend for you. And, this is very touching as it comes up now, because one of the people who did that for me, and you know Hank Brandt and Carolyn Rivers of the Sophia Institute in Charleston, and Hank, who recently passed away, I'm sorry to say, Hank was such a friend. At the same time when that couple couldn't be with us, when we lost our dear Mira, our dog, our yellow lab, and they lived right down the street, Hank called me up from Charleston and said, I won't even talk. You just say the word and I will fly up to Michigan and I'll cook and I'll fold your laundry, and I don't need to say a word. And that offer alone brought us so close because of that kind of presence you're talking about. And so that also dovetails back to what it means to be a true spiritual or soul friend, as John O'Donohue speaks of, Anamkara. And that is that we're friends in presence. We're friends.
And I think that means, too, that if we're really being a good friend, we see the capability of the other. They may be in their brokenness, they may be in their wounding, they may be in the most tragic moment of their life, and we see that they are capable. They may be in their bliss, they may be at their heights of their success, and we uplift that capability. But you talk about being our own friend first, and you use the lines, without any confidence or self-worth, without befriending ourselves, we are dangerously susceptible to sweetening the stew we prepare for others by tossing in a part of ourselves. And so I think that means that when we see ourselves as capable, we can see others as capable, and in that way we meet each other as equals?
Yeah, and both ways. That is, when we see, it's interesting that the word admire means to look at with wonder. And, so the greatest antidote to dwelling on what is missing is to affirming what is. And when we admire, if I admire you, not only do I bring light to your gifts, but the reflection shows me where the qualities that I admire are dormant in me. And when you're admired, you remember who you are. And so I look at admiration as an ongoing practice of friendship. What would it be if we were to practice admiration? And so I invite, any of our listeners, or as you know, I offer always journal questions and dialogue questions in the book. Who can you describe someone you admire and why? And what qualities, where do those qualities live in you? Where do they live in you? And this is where it's important, even to people we're very close with and that we know, to say to them more than once, you are so kind. You are so kind. You are so thoughtful. I witness your thoughtfulness. I saw it just the other day when you did this, and this. Of how
it would be beautiful if we become a culture more of praise and celebration as opposed to criticism and condemnation, or some of the examples of name calling and dejection that we tend to see on television. And you do have many exercises at the end of each section that allow individuals to deepen into their own contemplations about friendship and how to be in greater communion. And you also have some really subtle questions that could deepen us into some of the shadow areas of our consciousness, aside from the unhealthy ways that we might throw part of ourselves into the stew. You ask, how do we give ourselves away when no one asks us to? How often do we agree to things we don't believe in just to belong? How often do we go along with indifference or cruelty, afraid we'll be rejected? These subtle parts of ourselves, Mark, that oftentimes unconsciously or just in the moment we slip into. Talk a little bit about how that damages us internally and then damages the friendship that we're trying to create.
Well, I believe that each of us, one of our challenges is to be who we are everywhere. And if someone loves you, they will support that journey. So I think that someone loves you, they want you to grow and not stay the same. And so one way that one kind of fulcrum of how we are thwarted in our growth is the demand on others that to stay the same. Like we mistake constancy for reliability. So, you're acting differently, you're changing, and I go, well, wait a minute, what's happening to you? Well, that has nothing to do whether you can show up for me or not. So it's a very interesting, so how do we lean into who we are and who we're becoming and support each other? And that goes to quieting the voices that have been imprinted in us and listening for the voice that's coming from our own soul. And again, so a question, a good question to ask a friend is, what's it like to be you? What's it like to be you? And allow that conversation to unfold. To ask a friend, where are you living inwardly? On what continent are you living? I'm now in my 70s, and so I have crossed into the continent of aging. And what the terrain is like there, but while keeping the inner journey alive. So how do we, I loved Ivan Illich, the great sociologist of the 60s, an interview near the end of his life. He defined spiritual hospitality as helping another cross a threshold. And I love that.
You speak a lot about the threshold of friendship in the book, and we all have our own perspectives and ways that we look at the world, and can oftentimes become very self-absorbed and self-obsessed because our little world is the whole world to us. But there's something very rich in what you're saying about really knowing the other person, knowing how they feel. I know when I meet people, I want to ask them, tell me what breaks your heart. Tell me what makes it sore. Tell me what holds your mind trapped in this moment, and tell me what would free you. I want to know the innermost parts of the being because they show me a different perspective of the world. And you write, the commitment to see each other completely that returns us to the unity of souls, while the entanglements we dare not speak of prevent us from finding and knowing that bond. Speak a little more about that unity of souls and really allowing ourselves to tear down the boundaries and the walls, to not completely just live from our own state of the world that we see, but start to blend those worlds in a way that's intimate and yet authentic.
Well, and I think that we're suffering from this today, as you can see, obviously, in our modern culture, because there's a direct relationship proportionately between the more centered I am, the more grounded in that unity of souls and that unity of life, the more open I am to things different from how I see them. The less grounded I am, the more I need things to mirror and look the same. So so with all of the voices in our head that we don't uncover, the social isolation, the bubbles from social media, all of that exacerbates, and if we're not grounded in our own connection directly to life, because the paradox is if I go far enough into me, I meet you. And if you go far enough into you, you meet me. Mm-hmm. And that is the ground of seeking truth together. That is the ground of the unity of souls. And if we don't have that, then we start looking for what will only confirm what we already know. And that's not education at all. One of the paradoxes of knowing who we are is that it makes us a conduit for everything I'm not. If I know who I am, I can finally receive who you are. And that's a tandem practice. That's also a practice of friendship, is how do I keep growing so I can learn, tell me something I don't know. Tell me a story, any story. So it's not just about me. And how can I listen beyond myself? And I love the questions. I think the questions that you would want to ask others is a great example of a vow of spiritual friendship.
Well, you are certainly a friend to many, Mark Nepo, in the way that you extend your hand and your heart through all of the books that you write, and the gentle and empathic nature with which you speak and extend yourself. The something we find when listening, the thing worth keeping alive for the rest of time, is friendship itself. For being seen and heard empowers us to stand by our core. When standing by our core, we have the strength to be fully who we are. When we are fully who we are, we become humble instruments for each other's inevitable transformation. At our best, we serve as inadvertent catalysts for each other's eventual illumination. Coming together like this is intrinsic to our nature, and helping each other transform is one of the deep purposes of friendship. I invite you to get Mark Nepo's latest book, You Don't Have to Do It Alone, The Power of Friendship. It will surely delight you through all of the wisdom, the stories, and the questions that you can contemplate. Again, you can find out more about him at marknepo.com. That's Mark, Nepo.com. And check out the 2 upcoming events. September 15th through 21st, the Modern Elder Academy in Santa Fe is hosting him for a week-long experience. And there are 7 spots left for the April 2025 year-long journey in a small group of 16 where you meet 4 weekends over a year and deep dive with Mark Nepo. Thank you, Mark, for being on 1111 Talk Radio again and always such beautiful illumination. Until next time, I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living here on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Remember, you are not on the journey. You are the journey.